Hi, Stephanie. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, Maya? Thank you so
I'm
much for having me.
I'm very happy to see you. It's always very nice to chat with you and to see you. And today, actually, we're going to be talking about a subject that's very dear to both of us. We were both very heavily involved in this issue, and that is women in criminal defense. And what we specifically wanted to talk about today is the role of the female criminal defense lawyer. And I think there's no other person that I can think of that could be great and suited for this position and for this discussion because you were previously one of the female directors of the women's a group with the CLA, the Criminal Lawyers Association. And I know that any issue that relates to women and issues of practice related to criminal law for women is really dear to your heart. So today, I thought it would be nice for us to chat about this, Stephanie. And one thing that I think would be nice to start with is do women, in your view, have a role to play in criminal defense?
You know, the first thing I think when you ask me that question is, oh my God, I can't believe we're still asking this question and we're still having this conversation about whether women have a role to play in criminal defense.
Yeah.
But I think that actually that reaction, um, unfortunately, is not a realistic view of the time that we're living in right now for women. So I To explain what I mean by that, I think I'll just talk a little bit about myself, a little tangent for 1 second. So I think about myself as growing up in this sort of cocoon of feminism. My mother was a professional. My father was a teacher. He then later worked in academia. I went to an all-girls school where the school motto was girls can do anything, and it was written all over the school. Um, and coming out of that, I really never questioned uh, anything about gender roles. In my formative years, I never questioned feminism. I never questioned that I could be whatever I wanted to be. I never seriously considered the idea of not having a career. And it also never occurred to me that I couldn't be a serious lawyer and also like getting dressed up and love Taylor Swift and all of these things. None of that ever even occurred to me because of the way in which I was raised by my parents. My mother didn't have that benefit. She was told by her high school guidance counselor that she could never be an architect and she should consider being a teacher. And why was she going to university? And when I think about it, and it's really sad, but my daughters won't have that benefit either. And that's because it's impossible now to raise girls in a cocoon of feminism. We've lost that, I think, in great part because of the internet, because of social media. I can never stop my daughter from being exposed to Andrew Tate and Nick Fuentes and trad wife influencers on Instagram. And so that really brief period of growing up thinking you could do anything as a woman is was sadly very short. Um, so I don't think the problem of gender roles and dismantling uh, ideas that women can't be in professions, I don't think it's an old problem that we solved and we can say, why are we still having this conversation? We've solved that problem. I think it's actually a new problem that we're in right now and that we're battling a resurgence of right now that's in a very different form. I mean, that's a tangent about feminism. The question you asked me was, do women have a role to play in criminal defense? Uh, yes, of course, women have a role to play in criminal defense. Um, and the idea that we have to debate it is unfortunate, but appears to keep popping up again and again in this modern environment where we're facing this new wave of anti-feminist thought from all sorts of corners.
And do you think that women are actually making a difference in the profession?
I
And
do. The
of course,
first,
here, obviously, we're talking about criminal defense more specifically.
Mhm. I do, but first I feel much more. forcefully that women don't need to justify their position in the profession with reference to their sex. Right. So my colleague Diego Robitaille, when we were talking about this recently, put it this way: equality means that women have the freedom to be bad lawyers. And I think that's very true. So we don't have to add value by virtue of our gender to be here, just like racialized and indigenous lawyers don't have to add value by virtue of their gender to be here. We just are here doing this work because we are free human beings with agency and we want to do it. And that should be enough. Um, but that said, I do think that having female counsel does make a tremendous difference in the legal profession in a number of ways. And um, maybe I could say most fundamentally, I think about the development of law or the development of jurisprudence as a form of discourse. And discourse happens through dialogue. And so the quality of our output at the end of the day, what I mean by that is the jurisprudence that we're developing and the laws that we're interpreting serving the end goal of justice. I think that the quality of that output is enhanced through diversity of perspectives. And diversity of perspectives is enhanced through diversity of life experience. And so the more that we have different types of people with different types of life experiences working in criminal defense, the more we advance that pursuit of justice. And I really do believe that. Um, I also think that women come into cases seeing things differently because of their life experience. And because of that, you add tremendously to legal teams, or when you're doing cases on your own. I might come into a case in criminal defense and see strategic moments of strategic advantage or opportunity, gaps, weaknesses in a witness's evidence that my male colleagues just don't see because they are not coming into the case with the same life experience. They haven't lived in female environments. They haven't dealt with problems that women typically face disproportionately to men. And so they will actually not see the same uh, like I said, problems and opportunities in the evidence that I will see. And that perspective is very useful and can be of great benefit to individual clients as well.
And one thing, I don't know if you would agree with me on that. One thing I did notice as I was also thinking about this conversation, there are some niche areas in criminal law that are very much associated with the names of female lawyers. What I mean by that, for example, if I think of youth criminal justice, the first name that comes to my mind is Emma Rhodes, for example. If I want to
Mhm.
think about, impaired driving, I have Kyla Lee or Connie D'Angelo, like these are female defense lawyers. Their names come to my mind right away. If I want to think about Supreme Court advocacy, I think about you, Stephanie, because you're very much involved in
Right.
appellate, like Ontario Court of Appeal or the Supreme Court. Obviously, ORB, mental health. There's Anita Zaghetti who dominates the field. So there are a lot of women who actually dominate specific niche areas in criminal defense that I can think of even before I think of another male counterpart, not to diminish what males are doing, but females are able to also make a name for themselves in very niche areas. So I think it is important. They are doing a lot of work and they're doing very important work in those aspects. So, I mean, wouldn't you agree that they are actually contributing and really helping specific also areas in criminal defense?
I think women are. I think women are doing tremendous work all across the board, defending all different types of cases. And that there are women who are dominating in some niche areas in criminal law, the ones that you've pointed out, and many more. Um, I maybe this is just my orientation towards the idea, but I don't look at them. I look at them, of course, and I say, oh, wonderful, we have female role models. We have a problem of retention in the profession that is advanced through having senior members of the bar dominating different fields, mentoring and being role models for other young women coming up. Remember, we have this attrition problem where we have a lot of women in the first 10 years of
Right.
practice, and then that peters off dramatically
Hmm.
once we get above the 10-year mark. And so watching women dominate particular fields is the antidote to that, I
Yeah.
hope, or at least part of it. Um, I think those women dominate in those fields because they are amazing lawyers and smart, capable, analytical thinkers, sharp, fearless, all of those attributes that could also be equally shared by a man. I don't know that it is because they're women that they're dominating. They're dominating because of who they are and what they're capable of.
But I mean, at the end of the day, they are also capable, just like men, of also having a niche and finding, like an area where they can excel at. So they're equally as capable as their male counterparts. And yet, when they're doing their job, they seem to be criticized more than males. And so that's the other question that I wanted to ask. Like, why does it seem like when it's a female who's doing her job, just like another male, she's the one who gets criticized for doing her job, and people are expecting her not to do that. But we don't hear the same kind of criticism towards male criminal defense lawyers. So, what is your
Mhm.
take on that? What are your thoughts, Stephanie?
Mhm. No, it's a great question. I mean, I think women who are excelling in the higher echelons of any profession face more criticism typically than their male counterparts, or maybe criticism that feels unique because there's a gender dimension to it that their male counterparts are not facing. That said, I think that women in criminal defense are particularly vulnerable to this really pernicious form of criticism because we are working in this field which deals with the disproportionate victimization of women and children and certain categories of offenses. I mean, my practice is a huge amount in defending sexual assault cases and also domestic violence cases. And I think myself and other women who concentrate in that niche face a great deal of criticism with this idea that we're anti-feminist, um, or that we are advancing the project of patriarchy, or that we are somehow, uniquely gender traders for succeeding in this realm. Um, I've always thought that that is a very bizarre criticism. I mean, first, it takes for its um, validity this assumption that not only that women are never lying or always telling the truth when they are witnesses in a criminal process, but also that they should not be put through the same muster that we put the evidence of a man through when they make a complaint in a criminal process. And so well, I'm not insensitive to how difficult it is to undergo cross-examination, particularly in a sexual assault case. The idea that women should not undergo cross-examination or should just be believed as if they don't have the capacity to lie or to be mistaken. It seems to me to be uniquely anti-feminist in its own way, and not treating those women as fully formed people with instrumental rationality, with the ability to lie, with all sorts of complexities and dimensions, and objecting to the idea that they go through the exact same process as any other witness in a criminal trial. So there's that element to it. And then there's also this other fundamental misunderstanding of what we do, which is that this idea that we defend the crime or we try to somehow we make sexual assaults okay through doing the work of protecting a client's presumed innocence. And that's just a fundamental misunderstanding of the criminal justice system. If you're coming at it from that perspective, you don't even understand the core tenets of the process that you're
And
criticizing.
sorry to interrupt here, but
That's
I
okay.
do want to elaborate more on that point because there seems to be, obviously not everyone, but there seems to be this view, a misunderstanding of the role of a criminal defense lawyer in general, regardless of what the gender is, if it's a male or female. There is already a dislike of the job of a criminal defense lawyer. And this is a first problem, first fundamental problem that we're dealing with. And then there's the other layer of there's also the female criminal defense lawyer who is defending, like the guy who's attacking female victims or complainants. But going back to the more fundamental problem, which is why is there this not lack of understanding of the job? Like, why is a pure criminal defense lawyer, regardless of the gender, criticized for just doing their job when, like, the common comparison is with doctors. If they're saving a criminal or a monster, nobody's going to blame a doctor for doing that. They'll just say, well, he's doing his job. But why can't there seem to be the same perception when it's a defense lawyer?
Well, I think part of it for the average person who's reading the news is that the doctor doesn't get down and dirty interacting with the subject matter of what makes the patient a good or bad person. And we, criminal defense lawyers, for better or for worse, we are in the trenches with our client, battling out the conduct in question that makes them good or bad. And we can take a lot of heat for doing that. I mean, occasionally we have glimmers of light as well. We saw that in the way the press treated um, more recently the Umar Zamir trial. And we saw this understanding of how criminal defense lawyers can actually uncover truth and be vehicles for truth, the way that we see ourselves from reading the jurisprudence, right? If you're if you're a law nerd and you're in it looking at yourself through the lens of Supreme Court jurisprudence, we are the most powerful vehicle for the search of truth through our cross-examination of witnesses. But lay people don't always see it that way. Aside from these rare situations, wrongful convictions, and some of these famous acquittals, like I mentioned earlier, uh, it is just not. It is just not uh, maybe an interesting news bite, the way that we see news being communicated and read these days to talk about our role in advancing a search for truth and protecting a presumption of innocence. But it is very easy, especially when you're dealing with a high profile story that wants to generate a lot of media, to turn to the defense lawyer as the next victim, either for their tactics or for their personal characteristics. And that is, like I said earlier, premised on a fundamental misunderstanding of our role and what we do when we walk into a courtroom as one of the justice system participants who is wholly engaged in advancing the court's primary function of searching for the truth of any encounter.
And you did mention here a very important point, and it's the media also play a role here in this, in the way defense lawyers are portrayed, and the way they write their articles or their stories about an incident. They could shape in a way the public perception of the defense lawyers. I mean, like you can tell from reading an article sometimes if they're criticizing the defense team or if they're criticizing the Crown. So that also has an impact. But I mean, how can that change though? Or is there anything that we as criminal defense lawyers can do to change the image, A, of our profession and of, as female criminal defense lawyers, of how the public perceives us in particular in this profession? What are your thoughts on what can be done or what should be done?
Yeah, that's an interesting question as well. I mean, I think in terms of for myself being a defense lawyer, I knew what I was signing up for. And I like that fight to a certain extent. Um, and I don't expect the media to sort of stop doing what they're doing. They're motivated by uh, all sorts of different goals, and they have rights to free speech and fair comment, things that I think are fundamentally important um, in our society. And so if they want to put out the message that me or my colleagues are doing something anti-feminist, I respond to that message, but they have the right to write and to have that opinion. Um, I do think, however, that it is that they are, well, they have a right to the opinion is wrong, right? That sort of traditional free speech paradigm, and that there are things that we can do to make sure that fundamentally what our job is uh, shines through. And that's really just to keep doing our job properly, fighting for our clients fearlessly, vigorously, but with integrity and in line with our duties as officers of the court and as members of the bar to advance our cases and to advance our cases for our clients, like I said, with that integrity. Uh, and that I hope, or I've always thought, will shine through and will be evident to those who are watching the case. And that's not always going to be the case. Sometimes there are going to be complicated issues, and sometimes you're going to have to weather a storm in the media to do what you have to do. But over the long sort of arc of this progression, I would hope that it becomes clear to the average person that we are doing really an honorable profession and important work um, through the way that we represent our clients. I'm not sure if that answered your question directly. Did I answer your question directly?
Uh, what I also wanted to raise as well, Stephanie. I mean, like right now, I mean, we're a bit in a very bad situation for female and criminal defense because not only do we still get criticized for doing our jobs, and when I mean, in cases where females and males are doing the same job, there's more. It seems like there's more criticism towards females than males who are doing the exact same thing. Uh, but then there's also the problems that we're losing a lot of females in the profession, and that doesn't help as well. If we keep losing and we're not sticking in the profession, making it better, changing the perception, that's also another problem that we have. And I understand that criminal defense in general, there are it's becoming more difficult to practice in this area, but we see it more with females leaving the bar a lot more than males. And so I don't know, like, should there be more support from the male counterparts, or should there be, I mean, what can we do also to encourage more females to stay in the profession? Because I agree with you on the point that it is when you're doing your job, you're doing it well. That's the best way you can give the best impression and image of your job and the significance of your job. But there has to be more of that. There has to be more of us doing this. And we're sadly seeing more of us leave. Um, so what are your thoughts as well on this other problem, which I think is kind of related in a way, maybe not directly, but I do see personally that there is a bit of a correlation between the two, that we don't have enough who are staying to defend and to show how good and fierce and competent a female criminal defense lawyer can be.
Yeah, let me say something first on one point you made. You said when we stick around and we're doing our job well, that's how we fight back against this negative image and often unfair image you talked about earlier that we see popping up in the media. You said it much more eloquently than I did when I was answering that question. I completely agree with that. It is by staying here and continuing to do our jobs and to do them well and to love doing them. Like I love doing my job. I know you love doing your job. That is really the best way to fight back against that image. And then, um, I'll watch my language because this is a podcast, but we can just forget them when it comes to some of those media voices. Um, the question that you're asking, though, about retention is so difficult. It is one that I have been considering and working uh, working on in conjunction with many other women who are interested in this project for many years throughout my career, and it does not admit of easy answers. Certainly finding a community of both female and male colleagues who support you and your career, those things are in no short supply in the criminal bar. We have such a fabulous collegial supportive bar. Um, and I have found a lot of that through my work in different organizations, whether they be bar associations, the CLA, Advocate Society, just finding other people are just so excited about doing this work and want to do it with you, really changes. I don't want to say it changes a job into a passion, but it harnesses a bit of that passion that we all have for our jobs. Um, I think a lot of the barriers to keeping women in the profession are structural, and a lot of them are very difficult to change. They don't really admit of change, right? We can't, for example, the urgency with which court matters need to be dealt with, um, the volume of work required to do the job well, the amount of stress that being in litigation and in trial litigation and jury litigation creates. These are embedded aspects of criminal defense work that I don't think are going to go away, but that I think a lot of women find difficult to balance with other social expectations and difficult to balance with having families and raising children and all sorts of things. Um, the the answer may be that society needs to change around us more than that we can change. But in the meantime, we can keep supporting each other, finding those networks that help you harness your passion for the job, and um, continuing to assist your female colleagues with a number of things. One of the things I hear time and time again, this is a long answer, but that's hard for women is business development. And so encouraging women to form referral networks with one another, to assist each other with business development initiatives, is one thing we need to keep working on, while we're waiting for society to change around us and our love for this job.
That's true. And I mean, I think maybe the best thing that we can do for now until we get some other new ideas is to support each other, whoever is still in the profession, to keep supporting each other, encouraging each other, and working together as much as possible and joining associations that could, where we share the same passions and we have the same beliefs, and that can really help us maybe at least uh, help whoever is still in the profession and hopefully bring more of us into this profession at some point.
I couldn't agree more. If I could add just one note,
Of
like I
course.
just love my job, right?
Yeah.
And I find so much amazing about it all the time, not just in the subject matter, but the flexibility, the ease with which you can be your own boss, manage your own practice, choose to go into areas, kinds of cases that interest you. Um, Decide, oh, I'm getting bored. I've been doing too many of that kind of cases. I'm going to make a shift. There's so much as you reach the more senior years in this job that are so amazing and conducive to having a really wonderful life and lifestyle. And maybe one message, if we have younger women who are earlier in their career watching this, I could say is that um, the struggle through those middle years is worth it because this is an incredible job to have. Uh, and there is a lot to look forward to in the more senior years in this profession. You just have to stick around for it. So we hope everybody does.
And I agree. This is a really important point here that you are making. I mean, I'm not as senior as you are, but I am not a recent call anymore. And one thing I do agree with here with what you're saying, Stephanie, is that I think patience is super important in this profession. I say that because I'm known for having zero patience. I can't wait for anything. If it's not happening, I move on. I just don't wait for things to happen. But in this job, I have no choice but to be patient. You're not going to get the more serious cases in year one or year two. And sometimes it's after year five that you'll start to get the more interesting cases that you're waiting for, especially if you're someone on your own. It's different when you're in a firm. But I agree that patience is something that is very difficult to have, but is very important in this line of work. And sometimes I feel like some younger lawyers, unfortunately, who are very talented, leave because they don't have enough patience. And again, uh, there are other circumstances, of course. People have their personal circumstances that push them to leave as well. And so that varies from one person to another. But I do agree that if there's one thing that is important for everyone, that's not just for females, it's patience in this profession is very important.
Yes, and that even though we have our we have our struggles, I shouldn't say little ones, we have our retention struggle is big. This is a great job and a great place to work as a woman. And I think that there is a lot to stick around for younger female defense lawyers who are hearing about this retention issue and thinking, oh, everyone leaves. There must be a reason. Maybe I should leave too. No, there's a lot of reasons to stick around. It's false advertising, and it's a really great place to be.
So this was really very nice. I know we're both very busy, so and I don't want to take much of your time as well, Stephanie, but it was very nice to catch up with you today and to chat about a very important topic that is dear to both of our hearts. And hopefully we'll have more of these conversations. So thank you so much, Stephanie.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Maya. This was a pleasure.
Bye.